I'm appalled when I see your colleague in this house, Senator Flávio Bolsonaro, making jokes about picanha, making jokes about food. Look, the accumulated inflation during Bolsonaro's government was 27%. And during President Lula's government, it was 20%. Now, when you look at food inflation, the accumulated inflation during Bolsonaro's government was 59%. In the 3 years of President Lula's government, it was 13%. That is 4 times less. And this directly affects the issue of poverty and inequality, because a significant part of the income of the poorest is spent, as you well know, on essential goods, such as food. Yesterday, there was a report that made me indignant. I made a point of responding in Valor Economico, saying that President Lula's government was considering, and the president's campaign for the next term is to unlink the minimum wage from pensions. That's a lie. This has never been discussed by our government. It never was, and it never will be. This is the project of those who were defeated at the polls. In 2022, it was publicly defended by Mr. Paulo Guedes, and it will be defeated again, defeated at the polls this year. When you manage to keep food prices under control, you're freeing up income for those at the bottom so they can meet other needs. You are reducing the gap that separates those at the bottom from those at the top. Second, continuous cash benefit. Another important topic, the BPC, which has been the target of so many attacks, but the BPC is the foundation of an indirect policy. The BPC is what allows a mother with a child who has cerebral palsy, a mother with a child who has severe autism, a mother of a child with any type of disability from receiving the minimum for her subsistence. This person who already suffers so much under such adverse circumstances. The BPC under President Lula's government, we went from 5,115,000 beneficiaries to 6,385,000 beneficiaries. In other words, 1,270,000 people, congratulations, Minister Wellington, were reached through active outreach in the BPC. And this data is extraordinary. We hear a lot of prejudiced attacks against Bolsa Família. People say, but Bolsa Família, people don't want to work. Everyone here has heard that. People are on Bolsa Família. Right, they get comfortable. The people who stay on Bolsa Família. Nowadays, no one can find workers for anything. I even saw the other day some big businessmen, even billionaires, like the so-called Rei do Ovo, right? Saying it's absurd that he can't find anyone. But I'm sure that if he offered a decent salary and a 5 days on, 2 days off schedule, he would find people to work for him. They want workers to work for starvation wages, right? And working themselves to death. Now, the most amazing thing about all this, which, as Minister Elton has been saying very clearly, is that between 2000 and 2025, during President Lula's years in office, 2,000 families were able to leave the Bolsa Família program because they overcame poverty. Almost 3 million Brazilian families. This contradicts what they say about people getting comfortable on Bolsa Família. No, sir. 3 million left. Right? I could talk here about the PAA, which increased by 156%. About the People's Gas Program, which increased supply by 152%. About the systems, also extraordinary work. About the More Doctors Program, which doubled, right? During President Lula's administration. I mean, so many other facts, but I'll finish this part by bringing up 2 very important facts. Wellington and I had about 6 months ago at the UNDP event to celebrate something that was rarely talked about when the data came out this year. Right? Brazil reached this year the highest HDI in its historical series. Human Development Index, reaching for the first time in the country's history. Never before in the history of this country have we had such a high HDI. The HDI, Brazil, for the first time, entered the very high category, which is that of developed countries, 0.805. the highest HDI in the historical series as a result of all these policies. And of course, we reached a Gini index of 51.1, the second lowest level of inequality in the country's history. So look, this data shows a comparison. When the government, even with the limits of executive power, but when the government makes fighting inequality its policy, its project, it makes a difference. It makes a difference on the ground. It changes people's lives. And this is the comparison from our country's recent history. What we're living through today under President Lula's government and what we lived through in the previous 4 years. Now I finish by saying that despite these numbers being encouraging, uplifting, they are not enough. Because otherwise, we end up in a situation where we celebrate the reduction of inequality, the reduction of poverty, and that can actually lead us to become complacent. We've already done it. No, we still have a lot to do. A lot to do. Brazil remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. And this is a wound that we must continue to confront. For those living in poverty, life is urgent. We have to face it, even at a faster pace, and always at a faster pace than we've managed so far. This is a responsibility, a moral and political duty that our project represents, right? To be able to tackle the deep inequality that still governs the Brazilian tax structure, which is one of the factors that amplify inequality. Minister Wellington, Senator Payne. We passed a tax reform during this term. The Senate approved it, the House approved it, which simplifies taxes. It was important. But the second step is the one that began with the approval to eliminate income tax and start taxing at 10% those who earn more than 1 million per year, which is to tax income and wealth more in order to ease the tax burden on consumption, which weighs on the poorest and the middle class in this country. This is the challenge we still face in fighting inequality. Fighting inequality, it's also about freeing up leisure time, which is the most precious asset we have. It's time. And if we manage to approve the end of the 6x1 work schedule this year, it will be a very important step in fighting inequality in our country. Recover workers' rights, advance more rights, and move forward with public and social policies. Those who want to go backwards, who say that the Constitution doesn't fit in the budget, that the people's rights don't fit in the budget, right? But it has to fit. Right? It has to fit. And the way to do that is to cut from the top, not from the bottom. I see a lot of speculation in the newspapers, Wellington, about austerity. In other words, we hear things from people walking around, it's Faria Lima, austerity, going to talk to someone else. Look, the project that brought us here and the project that we have to offer and keep offering to the Brazilian people is to intensify the fight against inequality. If we have to make cuts in the budget, right? Let's cut the exorbitant interest that is paid on the public debt, almost $1 trillion every day. Let's cut tax breaks for big companies without any job creation requirements in return. That's where there's slack and room to cut in the budget.